Every human has an innate desire to be remembered after they're gone. Whether it's for conceptualizing the world's first airplane or breaking the record for the world's longest fingernails. Whether it's being hailed for painting the Sistine Chapel or becoming an iconic grunge musician from Seattle, when the dust settles, we want our legacies to endure. Some of us are inspired to master unique skills, while others aim to build lasting monuments. Yet, as a few outliers have realized over the years, sometimes all it takes to secure a place in history is one spectacular moment. Nowhere is this more true than in the world of motor racing. Sure, it's hard to find someone who isn't aware of the legacies left by teams like Ferrari, Porsche, and Audi. But some teams have discovered that you don't need to shine brightly for decades to be remembered by future generations. All you need is one spark of brilliance. Today, we're going to dive into the story of one of those teams, a team that created a truly remarkable vehicle as a passion project from a private garage, with no full-time staff. This team never set out to be known for efficiency, reliability, or even winning races. Their sole mission was to make headlines with raw, unbridled speed. Like a shooting star blazing across the night sky, their creation would emerge from obscurity to secure its legacy as the fastest car ever at Le Mans, before disappearing into history. This is the story of the WM P88. The late 1960s were a defining era for the 24 Hours of Le Mans, a decade highlighted by the speed and endurance of the Porsche 907s, Ford GT40s, and Ferrari 250s, which captivated both the track and magazine covers. The excitement of this period was contagious, even finding its way into the Peugeot headquarters. Peugeot wasn't new to motorsport. In fact, it had been somewhat of a pioneer. Its early Type 7 won the world's first competitive car race in 1894, navigating the streets between Paris and Rouen at just under 12 mph. While that may seem unimpressive compared to today's supercars topping 200 mph, it was a significant milestone for its time. Between 1910 and 1920, Peugeot scored wins at the Indianapolis 500, and in 1926, it made its first appearance at Le Mans, just 3 years after the race's debut. But by the 1960s, Peugeot had decided against fielding a full factory team at Le Mans, and had settled into its role as an engine supplier. For two of its engineers, however, the lack of sporting ambition was deeply frustrating. These two brilliant minds were Gérard Welter and Michel Meunier. They met on the job and quickly bonded over a shared passion for motorsport. Their friendship deepened, and soon they realized they couldn't resist the call of Le Mans, which beckoned to them like a siren song from a sea of powerhouse manufacturers. It didn't take long for them to merge their ambitions, as well as their last names, to form what we now know as Team Welter-Meunier, or WM. Despite their lofty dreams, the WM project was never a full-time endeavor. Both engineers had bills to pay and kept their day jobs at Peugeot. In fact, Welter, who was just 18 when he joined Peugeot, went on to have a highly successful career there, working on some of the company's most iconic models, including the 205 and, as we'll see later, the 405. So WM was a true passion project, a way for Welter and Meunier to push the limits of their creativity. The WM factory was nothing more than Welter's garage in the small French town of Torigny-sur-Marne, and its workforce consisted of enthusiastic volunteers. But don't be mistaken, this was far from an ordinary DIY project. The WM team aimed to win the 24 Hours of Le Mans, a goal that major manufacturers poured immense resources into achieving. That meant long hours, late nights, and countless weekends spent working on what was essentially a side hustle. 2 years later, in 1969, the duo unveiled their first car, a sports coupe based on the Peugeot 204. The following year, they developed a second prototype, a 1300cc mid-engine coupe, which entered the 3-hour race at the 1971 Le Mans test weekend, but failed to start due to clutch failure. Meanwhile, at the 1971 Le Mans race, the duo got a glimpse of what they were up against when British driver Jackie Oliver set a speed record of 246 mph in his Porsche 917. This record became a benchmark for WM, sparking a fierce determination to achieve similar speeds. It took another 5 years for WM's first prototype to finally reach the big leagues, with a little help from their friends. Up until then, Peugeot had been watching their engineers' progress with great interest, but hadn't offered official support. However, ahead of the 1976 Le Mans, the company couldn't resist getting involved. They provided Welter-Meunier with a 2.6L Peugeot V6 engine, originally used in Peugeot 604 models, to power their dream of competing in the 24-hour race. These PRV V6 engines were the product of a 1966 collaboration between Peugeot, Renault, and Volvo to develop shared components. WM created a chassis that met the ACO's, Automobile Club de l'Ouest, GTP regulations, and their P76 prototype debuted at Le Mans in 1976. Although only one prototype made it to the starting grid, qualifying in 38th place and retiring after 125 laps, the results were far less disappointing than they appeared. Peugeot's V6 engine gave the car an impressive 400 horsepower, allowing the homemade prototype to breach the 300 km/h, 186 mph barrier for the first time. Little did they know, this was just a preview of what was to come. Over the years, WM continued developing new prototypes with varying degrees of success. Their most notable achievements were the P79 and P80, which finished 4th overall at Le Mans in 1980. However, 1982 marked a turning point. That year, the ACO announced the formation of Group C, which increased the level of competition. Despite Peugeot's continued support, including a 2.8L turbocharged V6 engine, the underfunded WM team struggled to keep up. After a disappointing showing in 1986, the engineers were forced to re-evaluate their goals. It was then that Welter-Meunier made a bold decision. They would abandon the dream of building a reliable race car and instead focus entirely on breaking the top speed record. Thus began Project 400 in 1986, a mission to create a car that could reach 400 km/h, 248 mph, down the 3.7-mile Mulsanne Straight. For even the most dominant cars of that era, this was an almost impossible feat. Beating the existing record, held by a Porsche 917, would require more than just a few design tweaks. It demanded a complete overhaul. But if anyone could pull it off, it was Welter-Meunier, who no longer cared about reliability or winning. They were solely focused on speed. Welter dove headfirst into perfecting the car's aerodynamics. He needed to ensure the WM had incredibly low drag while still being stable enough for a driver to handle at top speed. His efforts led to the creation of a body design unlike anything at the time, the P87. This wide-body car featured a new nose and side pods and almost completely encased the wheels, significantly reducing drag and giving the car a distinctive, clunky look. Peugeot also stepped in to help, offering use of their wind tunnel every Sunday for 4 months and providing a 2.8L PRV engine with twin turbochargers, pushing out 850 horsepower. The P87 was undeniably fast, reaching 258 mph on a closed section of highway during tests. But in the 1987 Le Mans, the car struggled with reliability. It qualified in 21st place, reached 238 mph in the opening laps, and then exploded spectacularly due to engine failure. The P86, another WM entry, suffered the same fate, leaving the team devastated yet determined. Undeterred, WM returned with a new prototype, the P88, in 1988. This car featured minor modifications for increased stability and a new 3.0L PRV engine, boosting output to 910 horsepower. As Le Mans approached, no one expected WM to win. Their only goal was to set a new speed record. Yet disaster struck again. The P87 retired early, and the P88 was plagued by issues, spending over 3 hours in the pits. But in a twist of fate, the car was repaired, and just before 9 p.m. on June 11, 1988, driver Roger Dorsey took it down the Mulsanne Straight. With a simple instruction to turn up the boost, Dorsey hit a record-breaking 407 km/h, 252 mph. The car broke down shortly after, but no one cared. WM had made history. Peugeot even asked the team to adjust the record slightly to market their upcoming Peugeot 405 model, setting it officially at 405 km/h. The record would be nearly impossible to break, as authorities added chicanes to the Mulsanne Straight in 1990, making it a challenge unlikely to be repeated. And so, the WM Peugeot P88 secured its place in history. The Jaguars may have won that race, but the P88 will forever be remembered as the fastest car ever at Le Mans.